How should Congress respond to the rise of anti-Semitic incidents? Welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number. Today, we're diving into the Antisemitism Awareness Act, a new piece of legislation which aims to become part of the fight against anti-Semitism. Joining me is Stephen, and we're ready to unpack this complex, timely issue. Welcome. Let's start with the basics. What exactly does this act aim to achieve?
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for having me back. As we're all aware, recently there's been a troubling rise in anti-Semitic incidents related particularly to the war in Gaza. In fact, according to the Anti-Defamation League data, anti-Semitic incidents in the US almost tripled following the Hamas attacks in Israel. One of the ways Congress has decided to respond to this is with the Antisemitism Awareness Act. So essentially, this act is all about beefing up our response as a nation to anti-Semitism, particularly in educational settings like schools and universities.
So how does the act propose to do this?
Well, Sarah, it's like giving a sharper lens to identify and address anti-Semitism, particularly under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So it's about saying that discrimination is based on race, color, or national origin. Well, yes, but that also includes anti-Semitism.
Okay, that makes sense. But why is there a need for a specific act on this? Aren't there already laws in place that combat this type of discrimination?
Well, that's a very good point. While existing laws do cover some aspects of the discrimination, this act particularly hones in on the unique challenges posed by anti-Semitism. So it's adding an extra layer of protection to those existing laws, especially in education environments where young minds are being shaped.
Okay, interesting. And how is anti-Semitism being defined in the act?
Well, now we're getting really to the heart of what this act is. So the Act proposes to adopt a familiar and very common definition, the one set forth by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IHRA for short, which is a handy toolkit for spotting anti-Semitism in its various forms.
Like a decoder ring for identifying hate speech?
Well, yes, a little bit like that. It's about recognizing those subtle dog whistles and coded language that otherwise might go unnoticed and just make us all a lot more aware, really. So the definition is a very short and simple one. The IHRA definition simply states that anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities.
Okay. Uh, I feel like that definition is a little broad. And I remember seeing something about Representative Jamie Raskin saying that the bill does define anti-Semitism as a perception, which, you just read. And it kind of leaves the elements of what that perception is blank, meaning it's very nonspecific. When reading that, it does seem like, the judgment of if something is anti-Semitic could be in the eye of the beholder. I think all of us kind of, understand what is anti-Semitic. So, it's not quite in the eye of the beholder, but, it makes me wonder if there's concerns here regarding free speech. And, if this act could inadvertently stifle legitimate criticism related to the treatment of the Palestinian people throughout this war.
Yes. Well, that is the age-old question, isn't it? And it is the concern that people have been raising about this. So proponents argue that it's all about protecting these vulnerable communities. And that's perfectly right. And Jewish communities absolutely have to be protected. But we're always, when you're talking about protecting certain communities, particularly from hate speech, you then have that clash with free speech. And so the opponents certainly do worry that this would have a chilling effect on free speech and could perhaps be even unconstitutional. So in particular, at the moment, they worry that the legislation could get in the way of people from expressing perfectly legitimate criticism and protest against Israel's actions in Gaza. Raskin himself said the IHRA definition is plainly unconstitutionally vague. It could never withstand a rigorous due process analysis for individual punishment because it does not give a reasonable person particular notice of what the prescribed speech or conduct is in even the most rudimentary sense.
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope between combating hate speech and preserving fundamental freedoms of speech and kind of understanding where your speech could fall on the tightrope.
Absolutely, and it's quite the balancing act indeed. And Raskin's actual response to this is very telling actually, and illustrates the big problem here, because he does actually support the bill. After having
Mhm.
said all of that, he also said, "Well, it can't hurt much." And it may bring people despairing over anti-Semitism a sense of consolation. So he actually supported the bill on the grounds that he didn't think it would have much of an impact, which is a very odd way, a very odd reason to support a piece of legislation. The American Civil Liberties Union, though, takes a different approach, and they've called on lawmakers to oppose the bill. And they claim that the reason for this is that federal law already prohibits anti-Semitic discrimination and harassment by federally funded entities. So the bill isn't really needed to protect against this kind of discrimination because it's already protected in law.
So, what's next with this bill in Congress?
Well, the bill easily passed out of the House in early May. It had broad bipartisan support, though some Democrats did oppose it, but the majority did support it. And it's now in the Senate. So we can certainly expect some lively debates, perhaps a few more plot twists along the way before we get to the end of this story.
Well, interesting stuff, Stephen. Thanks for your time today on Bill Track 50 Beyond the Bill Number.
Anytime, Sarah, and to everyone out there, thanks for tuning in. And don't forget, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as TikTok and YouTube.